In chapter 6 of Isaiah, we saw Isaiah's call and his commissioning as a prophet before the Lord. And we believe this was taking place in the waning months of King Uzziah's life, either right around the time of his death or shortly thereafter. And of course, Isaiah, the Lord tells Isaiah in this commission that he's to basically go and tell the children of Israel to be ever hearing but never understanding, be ever seeing but never perceiving, and so forth, and to make their hearts callous, so basically that they don't hear the word of the Lord. And as we talked, this is not God trying to distance himself from Israel, but basically discussing this principle that as you draw away from God, God will draw away from you. If you want to understand God, you need to think on the things of God. And when Isaiah asked the Lord for how long he was to give this message, the Lord basically said, for the rest of your life. Then we now move into chapter 7. And chapter 7 contains what I believe is probably one of the most important of the messianic prophecies we see in the entire book of Isaiah. It begins chapter 7, verse 1. When Ahaz, son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, was king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem, but they could not overpower it. Now, a little history here to get all of this that's taking place in perspective. First, I said, we see just a little snippet of Isaiah's life under King Uzziah. And what's interesting is that we only see about the same snippet of Isaiah's life under King Jotham. Now, as I said, when we were talking about Uzziah, he was probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, of the kings of Judah since the division of the kingdom into the northern and southern kingdoms. And we don't really see anything of Jotham here in the book of Isaiah other than his mention in passing. And Jotham, we really don't know that much about Jotham, even from the Chronicles and the books of Kings. This basically, 2 Chronicles 27 says this: Jotham was 25 years old when he became king and reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. But unlike him, he did not enter the temple of the Lord. The people, however, continued their corrupt practices. So, unlike Uzziah, he didn't go into the temple to burn incense and ultimately be afflicted by the Lord. 2 Chronicles also tells us that Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the Lord's temple, that he did extensive work on the walls, it says at the hill of Ophel, which I think is one of the areas in Jerusalem. It says he built towns in the hill country of Judah and forts and towers in the wooded areas. He also waged war against the Ammonites, conquered them, and for the next 3 years the Ammonites paid tribute to Judah. But that's really all we know about Jotham. Ahaz was a different story. 2 Chronicles chapter 28 says, Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Unlike David his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and also made idols for worshiping the Baals. He burned sacrifices in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and sacrificed his children in the fire, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places, on the hilltops, and under every spreading tree. And of course the narrative continues and just goes downhill from there. So, back to verse 1, Ahaz, son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, was king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem. But they could not overpower it. Now, there are two kings mentioned from the north, Rezin and Aram. And Aram basically is that area where Syria is today. I think it was the remnants of the ancient Syrian Empire. Damascus was its capital. And Pekah is the king of the northern kingdom, and his capital is the city of Samaria. These two kings are making war against Judah. One of the things that is fascinating here in this narrative is that Isaiah and the Lord through Isaiah rarely refers to Pekah by name. They almost without exception refer to him as the son of Remaliah. Remaliah was never a king in Israel. And I suspect the reason for this is that the Lord, either the Lord or Isaiah, simply did not recognize Pekah as the legitimate king of the northern kingdom. And the reason for this, I believe, is that Pekah came to the throne by assassinating his predecessor, Pekahiah, and usurping his throne. Of course, the same was going to happen to Pekah here in about 3 to 4 years when Hoshea, the last king of Israel, assassinates him and takes the throne. This was not a good time to be king in Israel. So that brings the question, why did these two kings want to make war on Ahaz and Judah and Jerusalem? Well, there was a growing threat to the east in the person of Tiglath-Pileser III. He was king of Assyria. At this time, Tiglath-Pileser was focused on problems he was having on the eastern side of his kingdom. There were some countries, some kingdoms over there that he wanted to conquer, and they didn't want to be conquered. You can see where the conflict. Rezin of Aram and Pekah of Israel were fearful that Tiglath-Pileser, once he finished his business in the east, would turn west and come after them. And they were concerned because they suspected Ahaz and Judah to have formed an alliance with Tiglath-Pileser, or at least that he might have been sympathetic to Assyria. And so what they see then is if they march south and conquer Judah and depose Ahaz, they can eliminate a possible threat from the south when, as they are certain will happen, Tiglath-Pileser turns and marches on them. Verse 2, now the house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim. Ephraim was the largest tribe in the north. And as I was looking through this, there are at least 4 different terms that are used to describe or reference the northern kingdom. One of which is the northern kingdom. Another one is Israel. Another one is Ephraim, because Ephraim was the largest tribal area in the northern kingdom. And if that wasn't confusing enough, the northern kingdom is also referred to at times as Samaria. Samaria being the capital city and eventually becoming the name of that region by the time of Christ. So, Judah represents a possible threat from the south to Aram and Ephraim. They are marching 2 armies against Jerusalem, probably seeking to neutralize a potential threat. So again, verse 2, now the house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim. So the hearts of Ahaz and his people were shaken, as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. In other words, they were scared spitless by these 2 armies that are marching south towards Jerusalem. Now, I'm certain Ahaz, because he's coming off the armies that both Uzziah and Jotham had built, I'm certain Ahaz felt he could handle one of the 2, but probably not both. Verse 3, then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out, you and your son, Shear-Jashub, to meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Now remember, the Gihon Spring was the main water source for Jerusalem, and it was on the eastern side of the city in the Kidron Valley. And they had built an aqueduct. Eventually Hezekiah would build a tunnel that would run from the Gihon Spring into Jerusalem, so they would actually have the water source inside the city. That is not the case at this point. But they have built an aqueduct that fills 2 pools. the upper pool and the lower pool. And the aqueduct carries water to the pools. And of course the launderer's field, I think some translation called it a fuller's field, but it was so called because the women in Jerusalem would go to the pool, get water, and go out into the field and do their laundry. So this is where King Ahaz is standing. Now, why is he standing there? It was probably a place of isolation. It was probably a quiet place. I suspect he was probably contemplating what his response to these two approaching armies might be. And the Lord tells Isaiah to go to Ahaz at this place and bring his son, Shear-Jashub, with him. Now, the importance of Isaiah bringing his son is his son's name. His name means a remnant will return. And I believe this is in part a prophetic reference to the coming devastation Judah will eventually face under Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and this remnant of probably believing faithful children of Israel who will eventually return from Babylon to begin rebuilding Jerusalem. Verse 4, say to him, be careful, keep calm, and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of these two smoldering stubs of firewood, because the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram, and of the son of Remaliah. Aram, Ephraim, and Remaliah's son have plotted your ruin, saying, let us invade Judah, let us tear it apart and divide it among ourselves, and make the son of Tabeel king over it. So there again you see the son of Remaliah, not referring to Pekah by name. Okay, the son of Tabeel. We have no idea who the son of Tabeel was. There's some speculation that he may have been a high official in Aram who was from one of the provinces they were going to bring in and put him on the throne. There's some speculation that he may have been a possible high court member in Judah, possibly a member of the royal family in the line of David, which would give some legitimacy to him as the next king. But in any case, they were looking to put this son of Tabeel on the throne to be their puppet. That way they would eliminate the threat that Ahaz may have represented. Isaiah initially approaches Ahaz to assuage his fears. But you can also sense the Lord's disgust or his dismissal of Aram and Ephraim and their leaders and their armies when these two kings are called two smoldering stubs of firewood. In other words, they really represent no threat. Verse 7. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place. It will not happen. For the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is only Remaliah's son. What the Lord is telling Ahaz here is that both Aram and Ephraim are being led by mere men, while the ultimate authority in Judah and Jerusalem is still the Lord Most High, the God of Israel. And he's basically saying, compared to me, what are they? And then there's this sentence, it comes right in the middle of that. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. Now, there are some interpreters have a problem with this sentence because the invasion of Aram and Ephraim by Tiglath-Pileser will happen in about 12 years, not 65. What some of these more liberal interpreters or commentators fail to see is that in about 65 years, when Ashurbanipal a later king of Assyria, is on the throne, he finally finishes the deportations of the children of Israel and resettles many foreigners then into Samaria. In that sense, this prophecy that Ephraim within 65 years will no longer be able to be a people comes true not when Tiglath-Pileser invades and begins to take them captive, but when Ashurbanipal, the later king of Assyria, finishes the work begun by Tiglath-Pileser. So it's this ultimate deportation by Ashurbanipal that shatters the northern kingdom and makes it impossible for them to ever reunite as a nation or as a people. And then Isaiah says this as he concludes verse 9, and this powerful statement: if you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. The closer we draw to God, the closer God will draw to us. When we stand firm in our faith grows, and the better we're able to stand against all the vicissitudes that confront us. Do you like that word, vicissitude? I like that word, vicissitude. It basically means an unwelcome or unpleasant change of circumstances or fortune. And it fits. This study in chapter 7 of Isaiah has been divided into two parts to provide a convenient break when listening to the study. Part 2 of the study will start with verse 10, which follows directly from where part 1 ended.